Naomi Sterling stood by the tall windows of her Georgetown condo, the morning light spilling across the polished wooden floor. From the outside, her life seemed perfect. A loving husband, a beautiful home, and a silver wedding anniversary just weeks away. A quarter century of togetherness, but inside, something had shifted. Something she couldn't name, only feel. Darren Price, her husband, had been acting different lately. Too different. He came home late. He smiled too much, but his smiles didn't reach his eyes. He bought expensive cologne and started dressing better than usual. New suits, new shoes. At first, Naomi thought it was a midlife crisis, maybe an attempt to impress his boss. But soon, she noticed the phone calls, whispered conversations in the hallway, the way he'd pause, listen, and say softly, "She won't suspect a thing." And Naomi had learned long ago that when her husband used that tone, that careful, businesslike tone, it meant he was hiding something. The whispers at 3 o'clock It began one sleepless night. Naomi stirred awake to the faint hum of Darren's voice, coming from behind the bedroom door. The clock read 3:07 a.m. Her heart thudded in her chest. "We have to do this right," he said quietly. "She won't suspect a thing." There was a pause, then another voice, faint but unmistakable. "Of course not, son," said Celeste Price, Darren's mother. Naomi froze, her husband and his mother whispering in the dark, plotting something. Her mind raced through possibilities, but none made sense. What were they planning? And why so secretive, just weeks before their 25th anniversary? Darren's footsteps creaked down the hall. Naomi slipped back under the covers and closed her eyes, pretending to be asleep. He slid into bed beside her, his breathing heavy, restless. His body was warm, but his soul felt miles away. A different kind of morning. By morning, Darren was all smiles. He greeted her with an exaggerated cheerfulness that made her stomach turn. "Naomi, my love," he said, kissing her cheek. "How about we choose the restaurant for our anniversary today? I want everything to be perfect." "Perfect," Naomi repeated, forcing a smile. In 25 years, he'd never once cared where they celebrated anything. Birthdays, anniversaries, nothing. She was always the one planning, decorating, remembering. But today, he wanted perfection. "Sure," she said, careful not to show suspicion. "Whatever you like." As he left for work, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message flashed on the screen. "Call S at 11 a.m. Naomi frowned. S. She glanced at the door. Darren was still in the hallway, adjusting his tie. "Darren," she said casually, watering the window plants. "Who's S in your contacts?" He froze for half a second. Just a flicker, but enough for her to see it. Panic. "Oh, a Sanchez," he said quickly, "a colleague from Seattle. Consulting him on a project." Naomi smiled faintly. Okay." She didn't need to press further. She knew that look, the twitch in his left eye, the one he couldn't control when he lied. He'd used that same expression years ago when he said, "Of course I remembered our anniversary." An unexpected visitor that afternoon. The doorbell rang. Naomi opened it to find her mother-in-law, Celeste Price, standing tall in her tailored beige suit. A thin smile painted across her face. "Naomi, dear," Celeste said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "How are you? Preparing for the big celebration, I hope." Naomi forced a polite smile. "Slowly but surely. Darren wants to do it at a restaurant this year." "Very good," Celeste replied, her eyes scanning the room critically, as though she were inspecting a showroom. "A respectable venue. Celebrating at home feels small. A public event gives the right impression." The right impression. That was Celeste, always more concerned with appearances than people. She moved toward the living room, and sat down as if it belonged to her. "I've been thinking," she said, smoothing her skirt. "Darren is 53 now. Not so young anymore. And, well, we don't have grandchildren." Naomi stiffened. She had heard this lecture too many times. "We've made peace with that," she said softly. "It wasn't meant to be." Celeste waved a manicured hand dismissively. Yes, but I was wondering, perhaps you should prepare a will, for the grandchildren." Naomi blinked. "What grandchildren?" "Well, for my nephews, of course," Celeste said lightly. "They're good boys, studying, working. It's always wise to think ahead. The government takes everything otherwise." Naomi's teacup clinked softly as she placed it on the table. "That's thoughtful of you, but our affairs are fine." Celeste smiled, but her eyes gleamed with something else. Calculation. "And where do you keep the condo papers, dear?" she asked suddenly, as though it were an afterthought. Just in case. One never knows." Naomi's fingers tightened around the teacup handle. There it was, the real reason for her visit. In the safe, she said coolly. Why do you ask? Celeste's smile never wavered. Oh, just curious. It's good to know where things are for the boy's future. When she finally left, the silence in the condo felt heavy. Naomi stood there for a long moment, her mind piecing everything together. Darren's late-night calls, his mother's visit, the questions about property. Bit by bit, the puzzle was forming, and Naomi didn't like the picture it painted. A history of love and distance. Naomi sat by the window, the gray October sky pressing down like a curtain. She thought of the early days, the laughter, the plans, the way Darren used to look at her like she was the only woman in the world. They'd met in college. She was an accounting major, bright, practical, a little shy. He was confident, charming, already dreaming of managing big projects and buying condos in the city. They fell in love fast, married young, and promised each other forever. But forever had started to feel shorter each year. They never had children. The doctors had no explanation. Sometimes it just doesn't happen, they'd said gently. Darren had taken it harder than she had, especially after Celeste's snide remarks. Some women just aren't meant to be mothers. Naomi had smiled through it, always the diplomat, but part of her heart had broken in silence. Now, looking back, she wondered, maybe that's when the distance began, when disappointment built invisible walls between them. A secret on his screen that night. Darren fell asleep instantly. Naomi waited until his breathing slowed, then quietly slipped from the bed. His laptop sat on the desk, still warm. She tried his old password, the date they met. Wrong. She frowned. Darren had never changed it before. She tried his birthday. No. His mother's. Still no. Then, she tried their wedding date reversed. The screen unlocked. Her stomach dropped as she scrolled through the browser history. Each search felt like a knife. How to divorce when assets are shared. Spousal rights in property division. How to keep the condo in a separation. Tears welled in her eyes. He had been planning this for weeks, maybe months, and worst of all, he hadn't even had the courage to speak to her. Her phone buzzed suddenly, making her flinch. It was her friend Candace. Naomi, you won't believe what I just saw, Candace said breathlessly. Your husband at Tyson's Galleria, with a younger woman. They were at a jeweler's, looking at rings, hugging, laughing, the whole thing. Naomi closed her eyes. What did she look like? Maybe 30, blonde, fancy coat. Pretty, but fake. You okay? I'm fine, Naomi lied. Thank you for telling me. But nothing about her life was fine anymore. The roses and the litha next evening. Darren came home holding a bouquet of red roses and a box of chocolates. The same gesture he used the first year they dated. For my one and only love, he said, smiling as he kissed her. One and only. Naomi thought bitterly. She accepted the flowers and looked him straight in the eye. We need to talk about our future, Darren. He tensed, just slightly enough for her to notice. Talk about what? He said, turning on the TV. Everything's fine. Let's not ruin the mood. The anniversary's next week. Let's enjoy it. After the party, he added softly, we'll talk about everything. Naomi felt her heart sink. After the party, that meant he was planning something big, something public. She smiled faintly, masking her dread. All right, after the party. Inside, she felt an icy calm settle in her chest. After 25 years, she knew her husband better than he knew himself. He was going to make a move, and he thought she wouldn't see it coming. But Naomi Sterling wasn't the naive woman he believed she was. She had an ace up her sleeve. Something that would change everything. And for now, she wasn't going to tell him a thing. Music fades, leaving quiet tension. The truth has a way of showing itself slowly, quietly, like cracks in glass. You don't notice until everything shatters. The shadows beneath the silver cinematic narration, a blend of dialogue and emotion, the calm before the storm begins to fracture. Soft ambient piano fades in, with rain tapping faintly in the background. When you've shared a life with someone for 25 years, betrayal doesn't arrive like thunder. It comes softly, like the slow drip of a leaking roof. You only notice the damage when it's too late. A strange kind of anniversary. Naomi woke up to the sound of rain sliding down the windows. The house smelled like fresh coffee and betrayal. Darren was in the kitchen, humming, as if everything in their world was normal. He was dressed sharply, as though he had a meeting instead of a weekend breakfast. Morning, love, he said, flashing that too-perfect smile. Sleep well. Naomi stirred her spoon in silence, watching the coffee swirl. You're dressed early, she murmured. Big day. he said. Lots to finalize before next week. Finalize? She asked, her tone light but careful. Oh, or reservations, catering, you know the drill, he replied quickly. Naomi nodded, her face unreadable, but inside, her heart whispered, he's lying again. The anniversary plan that evening, Darren announced that their 25th anniversary would be held at the Valencia, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, the kind where crystal chandeliers hung like frozen rain, and champagne flowed like promises. I want this to be special, Naomi, he said, handing her a small envelope. A night to remember. Naomi opened it, a glossy invitation embossed in silver, the silver anniversary celebration of Darren and Naomi Price. Below, in small, elegant print, private dinner and toast, hosted by Darren Price. Her breath caught, hosted by Darren Price, not Darren and Naomi. You planned this yourself? She asked softly. Well, he said, scratching the back of his neck, you've been busy lately, and I thought I'd handle it. You deserve to just relax. Relax, she echoed, studying his face. After 25 years, you think I'd relaxed by letting go. He smiled, but his eyes shifted just slightly toward the floor. He didn't answer. Naomi tucked the invitation into her purse and said nothing. But she knew, something in her gut told her this celebration was no celebration at all. The lawyer's visit 2 days later, Naomi received an email from her accountant about a document review request. Confused, she called him. Naomi, he said hesitantly, I just received a draft property transfer request from a law firm under Darren's name. It seems he's moving joint assets into a private account. Did you authorize this? The room spun. What did you say? It's not final. I flagged it for confirmation. Should I block it? Naomi's voice was calm. To calm. Yes, block everything, and send me copies. After the call, she sat in silence for a long time. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger. Tired eyes, trembling hands, lips pressed thin with fury. Then, she whispered to herself, all right, Darren, if this is a game, I'll play. The search for Naomi needed proof, and she knew where to start. Darren's office. He kept a second phone there, for business matters. One, he never let her touch, but she had learned his patterns, how he locked it, when he checked it, where he hid it. On Thursday, she packed lunch for him like always, and slipped a small GPS tracker into his car key. A subtle one, no bigger than a dime. Candace had given it to her for fun years ago. Now, it would be her ally. That evening, when Darren claimed he had a late client meeting, Naomi opened the tracking app. He wasn't at the office. He was at a high-rise apartment downtown, apartment 1704. Her pulse quickened. Who lived there? The next day, while Darren was at work, Naomi drove to the building, a sleek glass tower with a luxury lobby. She asked the concierge casually, Hi, I'm visiting my sister, apartment 1704. Is she home? The concierge smiled politely. Oh, Miss Spencer. She's out for lunch, but should be back soon. Miss Spencer. The letter S. Naomi thanked him and walked back to her car, her mind racing. She didn't need to see the woman yet. Now she had a name, and that was enough for a start. The envelope that night. Naomi placed the manila envelope on the kitchen counter, deliberately in plain sight. Darren came in, loosened his tie, and froze when he saw it. What's this? He asked. Naomi smiled sweetly. A surprise for you. He hesitated before opening it. Inside was a blank sheet of paper except for one line. I know. The color drained from his face. What is this supposed to mean? He's tammered. Naomi took a sip of wine. You tell me. He tried to laugh it off, but the way his hands trembled gave him away. You're being dramatic, Naomi. You always don't, she interrupted softly. Don't insult me with lies tonight. Let's save the show for our anniversary dinner. He stared at her, his face pale, eyes flicking nervously toward the living room door. You wouldn't want to embarrass yourself, he said coldly. Oh, darling, Naomi whispered, leaning close. I think embarrassment is the least of your worries. Celeste's warning the next day. Celeste appeared again, unannounced. This time, her smile was sharper. Naomi, I came to remind you to stay composed during the anniversary, she said. You know how Darren values dignity. Naomi tilted her head. Dignity, is that what you call deceit now? Celeste's expression hardened. You've had a good life, dear. A nice home, stability, comfort. Darren has been generous. Don't make things difficult for him. Naomi laughed softly. Generous? He's about to take everything from me. You should be grateful for what you've had, Celeste snapped. He's moving on. Naomi, you should too. That word moving on echoed like a bell. Naomi stood quietly, letting it sink in. Then she looked Celeste straight in the eye. "You're right," she said finally. "He's moving on, and I'm moving differently." Celeste blinked. "What do you mean?" Naomi smiled. "You'll see." The calm before the showdown. By the week of the anniversary, Naomi had gathered everything she needed: emails, transfer requests, GPS logs, even photos courtesy of Candace, who had followed Darren to the Hyries again and caught him kissing Sophie Spencer outside her car. Each piece was neatly documented and stored in a file marked silver. Naomi wasn't sure yet how she would use it, but she knew when. The night of the celebration, the anniversary day, the morning of their 25th anniversary, dawned bright and uncomfortably beautiful. Darren greeted her with breakfast in bed, a rare gesture that now felt rehearsed. "Happy anniversary, love," he said, setting down the tray. "Tonight's going to be perfect." Naomi smiled faintly, tracing the edge of her coffee cup. "I'm sure it will." He kissed her cheek. "I've even prepared a surprise." She looked into his eyes, and for a fleeting moment, saw the man she'd once loved, the one who danced with her barefoot in the kitchen, who whispered promises under moonlight. But that man was gone. In his place stood a stranger who thought she was blind. As he left to finalize last-minute details, Naomi opened her drawer and pulled out a small silver locket, the one he'd given her on their first anniversary. Inside was a picture of them, young and smiling, full of dreams. She closed it gently and whispered, "Tonight, I'll make sure you remember who I am." A silent preparation that evening. Naomi dressed slowly, deliberately. She wore a silver gown, elegant but simple, and a pair of pearl earrings Darren had once said made her look too mature. She smiled at that memory. It was fitting. Before leaving, she tucked the silver file into her handbag. Every lie, every betrayal, every receipt of deceit, waiting for its moment to shine. When she looked in the mirror one last time, she didn't see a broken wife. She saw a woman about to reclaim her story. The silver celebration, cinematic narration, quiet tension, slow burn emotion, dialogue mixed with inner voice, soft orchestral build, violins rising slowly under the hum of city lights. Revenge doesn't always need a weapon. Sometimes, it only needs timing and truth. The arrival of the Valencia shimmered that night. Chandeliers glowed like constellations, crystal glasses sparkled, and laughter floated across the air like perfume. It was the kind of place where people smiled too wide and secrets wore silk gowns. Naomi arrived alone. She stepped out of the car, the silver of her gown catching the golden streetlight. She moved slowly, gracefully, like a queen walking toward her own coronation. The doorman greeted her warmly. "Mrs. Price, welcome. Mr. Price is inside waiting." Inside, a private hall had been decorated lavishly. White roses, silver candles, a banner that read 25 years of love. Guests mingled, Darren's business partners, old friends, and even Celeste, perched near the front like royalty overseeing a coronation. Darren turned as Naomi entered, his smile gleaming, his voice carrying confidence. "Ah, there she is, the woman of the hour." Applause followed. Cameras flashed. Naomi smiled softly, though her heart thudded with icy precision. He approached and kissed her cheek, the kind of kiss that photographs well but feels like nothing. "You look stunning," he whispered. "Perfect, thank you," she replied, her tone calm. "So do you." They posed together for photos, their bodies close but souls miles apart. To the world, they were the perfect couple, celebrating a milestone of devotion. To Naomi, they were actors in a play she was about to rewrite. The speeches begin. Dinner was exquisite: champagne, caviar, laughter that felt too loud. Halfway through, Darren stood up, tapping his glass. "Everyone," he began, his voice smooth as silk, "thank you for being here tonight. This celebration means more than words can express." Naomi watched him, expression serene. The silver candlelight reflected off his wedding ring, a ring he would soon discard. 25 years with Naomi," he continued, placing a hand over his heart. "She's been my rock, my confidant, my greatest supporter. Tonight, I want to make an announcement, something new, something hopeful for the future." A murmur ran through the guests. Naomi's fingers tightened around her napkin. There it is, she thought, the moment. Darren smiled, his eyes flicking briefly toward Celeste, who gave an approving nod. "Life is full of changes," he said, his voice trembling slightly with false sincerity. "Sometimes, love evolves, and we must learn to embrace new beginnings." The room grew quiet. Naomi could feel her pulse in her throat. "Tonight," he continued, I wish to honor the past we shared. He reached beneath the table and lifted a silver gift box, and to mark the start of a new chapter, he turned toward Naomi, his face a mask of sympathy. Naomi, my dear, you've given me 25 beautiful years, but it's time we both moved on. Naomi's breath caught. Gasps echoed through the hall. He opened the box and pulled out a stack of papers, white, crisp, legal. These are divorce papers, he said softly, as if explaining something gentle. I wanted to do this with honesty, surrounded by our loved ones. You deserve to be free to find happiness again, and so do I. For a moment, the room was silent, a stunned, horrified silence broken only by the clink of someone's fork dropping. Naomi looked at him, calm, unblinking. Inside her world had stopped moving. The shattering Celeste dabbed her eyes dramatically. Such maturity, she whispered to a friend. He's handling it so gracefully. Naomi stood slowly, her silver gown catching the light like a blade. Gracefully, she repeated softly. Yes, that's one word for it. Her voice was even, almost tender, but her eyes gleamed with cold clarity. Darren, she said, you always did have a talent for performance. Doing this in front of everyone, I must admit, it's bold, cruel, but bold. He shifted uneasily. Naomi, please, let's not make a scene. A scene. She smiled faintly. Darling, the scene was already written by you. She reached into her purse and pulled out a silver envelope, setting it gently on the table. You have your papers. I have mine. Darren frowned. What is this? Evidence, she said simply, of your infidelity, of your asset transfers, and of your darling Sophie Spencer, your new beginning. The crowd gasped. Celeste's smile faltered. Naomi turned toward the audience, her voice calm but carrying like a bell. For those who don't know, my husband has been seeing his colleague Sophie Spencer for several months now. He's been preparing to transfer all our joint assets into a private account under her name. And tonight, in front of family and friends, he decided to humiliate me with divorce papers. Her words hung in the air, sharp and cold. Cameras clicked, phones recorded. Darren's face flushed. Naomi, stop this right now. Oh, don't worry, she said sweetly. I'm almost done. Naomi reached for the silver file and handed it to one of Darren's business partners. You might find this interesting, she said. Emails, receipts, everything. It seems your company's finances were also repurposed for personal gifts. Whispers erupted. Darren's colleagues murmured among themselves, pulling out phones, flipping through emails she'd just exposed. You wanted honesty, Darren, Naomi said softly. Now you have it. He stood frozen, his mouth opening but no sound emerging. Celeste rose, her voice trembling. You vindictive woman. After everything we've done for you. Naomi turned to her, calm as ever. You mean, after everything you've taken. But don't worry, Celeste, you'll get your share. Darren's lawyer will contact you soon about the fraud investigation I've just triggered. Celeste's face went white. You didn't. Oh, I did, Naomi said, her tone almost gentle. You taught me well. Appearances matter. The collapsed Darren stumbled forward, his voice cracking. Naomi, please, we can fix this. You don't have to do this here. Naomi looked at him, and for the first time in years, she felt nothing. No pain, no anger, just peace. You broke something that can't be fixed, she said. You didn't just betray me, Darren. You buried the woman who believed in you. She turned to the crowd. I'm sorry to ruin your dinner, but the truth deserved to be served first. Then she placed her ring on the table. Quiet, final. Happy anniversary. She walked toward the exit, head held high, her silver gown trailing behind her like the closing curtain of a tragedy. Behind her, chaos unfolded, voices rising, cameras flashing, Celeste crying, Darren pleading, but Naomi didn't look back. The aftermath of silence outside, the night air was cold. Naomi stepped into the streetlight, the city humming softly around her. Rain had begun to fall again, soft, steady, washing the past away. Her phone buzzed. A message from Candace. Saw the lives. You're trending. Are you okay? Naomi smiled faintly. Better than I've been in years, she replied. She took a deep breath. For the first time in decades, she felt weightless. Piano fades into a low, haunting cello. When love ends, it doesn't always die in flames. Sometimes, it dissolves quietly, leaving only the echo of what once was. But when you stand in the ashes long enough, you remember, you can build again. The fallout tone, cinematic, emotional, and transformative. The world reacts to Naomi's truth. Soft music begins, low piano, then slow violins rising like dawn after a storm. Some endings don't destroy you, they uncover who you really were beneath the silence. The morning after Naomi woke to sunlight cutting through her curtains, for the first time in 25 years, the other side of the bed was empty, and it felt right. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Messages, voicemails, notifications. Candace's voice came through first. Naomi, you're all over the news. Every outlet's talking about the silver anniversary scandal. You handled that like a queen. Naomi smiled faintly, sitting up, a tired queen. Maybe, girl, you exposed that man like a Netflix finale, Candace said. People are calling it poetic justice. Naomi turned on the TV. Headlines flashed. Businessman Darren Price exposed at own anniversary for fraud and infidelity. Naomi Price, the wife who said enough, from silver love to silver lies, the story that shook Georgetown. Her hands trembled slightly. She hadn't meant for it to explode like this. All she'd wanted was truth. But now, truth had a microphone. The aftermath of Power. Within 48 hours, Darren's company issued a statement. Mr. Price has taken a leave of absence pending internal investigation. His name was trending everywhere, not for his business, but for betrayal. The same colleagues who had toasted him now avoided his calls. Celeste's social circle, once filled with smug brunches and gossip, turned cold. One neighbor was even overheard saying, "Imagine humiliating your wife like that in public and then getting caught for fraud. Serves him right." Naomi should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt quiet, a strange peace mixed with exhaustion. "I didn't destroy him," she told Candace one evening. "He destroyed himself. I just handed him the mirror." Candace nodded. Still, not many could have done it with such grace. Naomi smiled faintly. "Grace is the only armor I had left." The house that spoke in echoes. Darren had moved out days after the dinner. His lawyer sent an apologetic letter. Mr. Price requests an amicable dissolution. Naomi didn't respond. The condo, once filled with his energy, was now silent, almost sacred. She cleaned the space, one room at a time, as if erasing fingerprints of a life that wasn't hers anymore. In the closet, she found his cologne, still half full. She opened the cap, inhaled, then closed it and set it aside, not out of nostalgia, but closure. That night, she lit a candle by the window and poured herself a glass of wine. The city lights blinked below, indifferent and alive. "I thought ending this would break me," she whispered, "but maybe this is where I start." The visit. A week later, Celeste showed up again, without her usual arrogance. Her makeup was heavy, her tone defensive. "Naomi, I think we've both suffered enough embarrassment," she said briskly. "Darren's lost everything. He's barely sleeping. Surely you don't need to press charges." Naomi looked at her quietly. "I didn't file any." Celeste blinked. "You didn't?" "No," Naomi said, pouring tea. "The authorities did. After the documents reached the audit office, his company handled the rest. I don't need to ruin him, Celeste. He's doing that just fine." Celeste shifted uncomfortably, her old composure slipping. "You could still show mercy." Naomi smiled gently. "Mercy? After 25 years of lies, I think mercy looks different to me now." Celeste opened her mouth to speak but couldn't find the words. Naomi continued, her voice soft but sharp. "You once told me I should be grateful for what I had. You were right, I am, because what I had was me. And I finally remembered that." Celeste stood, her mask of dignity cracking. She looked at Naomi one last time before leaving. For once, she didn't have a comeback. A message from the past. That evening, Naomi received a message from an unknown number. "Darren, Naomi, please, I never meant for it to go that way. You blindsided me in front of everyone. I lost everything." She stared at the words for a long moment before typing back, "Naomi, so did I 25 years ago." She hit send, then blocked his number. No anger, no tears, just finality. The quiet transformation days turned into weeks. The noise around the scandal began to fade, replaced by something softer: admiration. A women's magazine reached out, asking to feature her story under the headline, "Finding Strength After Betrayal, Naomi Price's Journey." Naomi agreed, on one condition, that the story focus on healing, not revenge. During the interview, the journalist asked, "Do you regret exposing him so publicly?" Naomi smiled faintly. "Regret is for people who still want to go back. I don't. So what do you want now?" The journalist asked. Naomi looked out the window, the afternoon light warm on her face. "Peace," she said, "and purpose." The Gallery of New Beginnings. Months later, Naomi opened a small art gallery, Suverlinis. She'd always painted in secret soft landscapes, abstract emotions, shadows and light colliding. Now, her pain had become her palette. At the opening, Candace raised a glass. To Naomi, she said proudly, to survival, to truth, and to starting over. Naomi smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. To silver, not for what it shines, but for how it bends without breaking. The room applauded. In the crowd, strangers looked at her not with pity but with admiration. The letter one afternoon, she received a letter forwarded through her lawyer. It was from Darren, written by hand. Naomi, I watched your interview. You were calm, graceful, the woman I fell in love with. I'm sorry for everything. If I could undo it, I would. You were always better than me. I hope you find happiness, even if it's without me. Darren. Naomi read it twice, then folded it neatly. She placed it in a drawer, next to her wedding locket. I already have, she whispered. The mirror moment that night. She stood before the mirror, the same one she'd once cried in front of, praying for her marriage to survive. Now, she looked at her reflection and saw something different: strength, serenity, and a faint smile that didn't need validation. Her voice, quiet but steady, filled the room. You made it, Naomi. The call from the future. One day, she received a call from an old contact, an NGO that supported women starting over after divorce. They invited her to speak at a seminar titled Silver Doesn't Rust. Your story inspired so many, the coordinator said. Would you share how you rebuilt yourself? Naomi hesitated, then said softly, I'd love to. If my fall taught me anything, it's that silence protects no one. A final goodbye that weekend. She visited the cemetery where her parents rested, the people who had taught her what love truly meant. She placed a single white rose on the stone and whispered, I kept my promise. I didn't lose myself. As she stood there, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and for a moment, she felt something like peace settling into her bones, not the loud kind, but the kind that stays. Music swells, soft piano returning, strings lifting, light breaking through. I thought my story ended when he left, but it began when I finally did. Silver was never about the medal, it was about reflection, and now, I finally see myself. The light after the storm. Tone, serene, reflective, deeply emotional. Naomi's redemption, peace, and quiet triumph. Soft, ambient piano begins, blending with the sounds of rain fading into morning sunlight. They say forgiveness is freedom, but sometimes, peace is simply never needing revenge. The invitation. A year passed. Naomi had become a quiet symbol of resilience in Georgetown, not a celebrity, not a victim, just a woman who had found her strength again. Her art gallery, Silver Lines, flourished. Each painting carried a story, hope bleeding into color, pain woven into brushstrokes. One morning, while she arranged fresh flowers at the gallery entrance, she received an envelope, cream-colored, sealed with gold wax. The handwriting was familiar, elegant, restrained. She hesitated before opening it. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Celeste Hart and Darren Price. Her hand didn't tremble this time. She simply smiled, a small, tired smile. Full circle, she whispered. The choice that night. She sat on her balcony, the letter on the table beside her. Candace called, as if on cue. Naomi, tell me you're not even considering going to that circus. Naomi chuckled softly. I'm not, but I don't hate them anymore. You should. They earned it. Hate is too heavy. Candy, Naomi said gently. They already live inside their own punishment. Candace sighed. You're a better woman than I am. No, Naomi smiled. Just one who finally learned peace isn't about them, it's about me. She tore the invitation in half, then let the pieces drift off the balcony, carried by the wind like old ashes. The painting called Silver Dawn. Weeks later, Naomi unveiled her most personal artwork yet. It depicted a woman standing in the middle of a storm, hair wild, face calm, light breaking through clouds behind her. At her feet lay shards of a broken mirror, reflecting pieces of sunlight. The painting was called Silver Dawn. When the curtains lifted, the audience gasped softly. Many knew her story. Now they saw it reborn in color. A young journalist approached her after the show. Mrs. Price, she began, then caught herself. Ms. Sterling, your painting moved me to tears. What inspired it? Naomi smiled, her eyes glimmering. The end of something that was never really mine, she said, and the beginning of someone who finally was. The encounter. Months later, Naomi was invited to speak at an art conference in Charleston. After her speech, a talk titled Beauty After Betrayal, a man from the audience approached her. He was in his early 60s, tall, warm eyes behind reading glasses. He introduced himself as Elliot Jameson, a photographer and widower who ran a nonprofit supporting women's education. "Your story reminded me of my late wife," he said softly. "She rebuilt herself after a long, painful marriage. She used to say that art saved her." Naomi smiled, touched. "Art did the same for me. It teaches us that broken things can still make beauty." They spoke for hours about art, travel, silence, and second chances. He didn't flirt. He listened. It had been years since Naomi felt that kind of calm in someone's presence. When he finally said goodbye, he handed her his card. "If you ever want to collaborate on a project or a cup of coffee, I'd be honored." Naomi took it, smiling softly. Maybe both. A letter to herself that night, back at her hotel. Naomi opened her journal. For years, she'd written letters she never sent, to Darren, to Celeste, to her younger self. This time, she wrote to herself again, but the tone was different. "Dear Naomi, you survived what tried to break you. You found light, not because someone handed it to you, but because you became it. You don't need revenge. You don't need validation. You just need to keep walking in peace. Love, me. She folded the page neatly, pressing it between the cover. This one didn't need to be sent anywhere. It had already arrived. The coffee by the sea. A few weeks later, she met Elliot again, this time by the sea. They sat on a wooden deck, waves crashing gently below. Elliot smiled, handing her a coffee. "You know, I looked up your gallery. I think your work is more about healing than art." Naomi laughed softly. "They're the same thing, aren't they?" They sat in silence for a while, not awkward, but peaceful. The kind of silence that feels like two souls resting. Elliot finally asked, "Do you ever miss him?" Naomi looked out at the horizon. "No," she said honestly. "I miss who I thought he was, but I don't miss the woman I was with him." He nodded, understanding. That's a rare kind of clarity. Naomi turned to him, smiling. "It cost a lifetime." The museum exhibit 2 years later, Naomi's work was featured in a national museum under the title Silver Reflections, The Art of Renewal. Visitors read her story, painted through colors, heartbreak turned into hope. At the center of the exhibit hung her final piece, The Anniversary. It showed a long table, set for two, with one empty chair. Outside the window, dawn light streamed through, and in the reflection of the glass, the empty chair shimmered like silver. A small plaque beneath read, "Some anniversaries mark endings. Mine marked a beginning." The unexpected letter. One morning, Naomi received a small, plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph, Darren and Celeste's wedding picture. They looked elegant, smiling, but Naomi could see it, the emptiness behind their eyes. There was no note, just the photo. She placed it in a box labeled The Past and slid it to the back of her closet. "Stay there," she murmured, "where you belong." A visit from Hope that evening. Elliot stopped by her gallery. He'd been away on a photography trip in Iceland and brought her a gift, a framed photograph of the Northern Lights. "For you," he said. "The sky reminded me of your painting, wild, beautiful, free." Naomi traced the glass lightly. "It's stunning." Elliot smiled, like its recipient. Naomi laughed softly, touched. "Careful, you'll ruin your artist mystique." "Maybe it's time to let some light in," he said. Naomi hesitated, then met his gaze. "Maybe it is." The Silver Horizon. Months later, Naomi and Elliot opened a joint exhibition titled Fractured Light. Her paintings and his photographs danced together, hers from shadow to sunrise, his from loss to rediscovery. On the opening night, Naomi stood before the crowd and spoke. "They say silver is the color of age, but to me, it's the color of endurance. It doesn't shine the way gold does, it reflects, and reflection is how we heal." Applause filled the hall. Candace cried in the front row. Later that evening, Naomi stood by the window, holding a glass of champagne. Elliot joined her, placing a gentle hand over hers. "So," he said, smiling, "what's next for Naomi Sterling?" She looked out at the horizon, city lights merging with twilight. "Whatever comes," she said softly, "but this time, it'll be on my terms." Epilogue. Silver Doesn't Rust. Years later, her memoir was published, Silver Doesn't Rust, My Journey from Betrayal to Peace. It opened with a single line, "He gave me divorce papers on our silver anniversary. I gave myself freedom." The book became a quiet bestseller, not for scandal, but for truth. In her final interview, Naomi said, "I used to think love meant staying. Now I know love means seeing yourself clearly, even when the world tries to blur your reflection. Silver doesn't rust. It bends, it softens, but it never loses its shine." Music fades, soft piano, blending with the sound of ocean waves and distant laughter. My name is Naomi Sterling. I loved once, I broke once, and I rose again. This is my silver story.